Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Ohio Fair Lending's discussion about land banks here in Cleveland and throughout the state of Ohio. This is one of the rare opportunities we've had almost a majority of the people from outside of Greater Cleveland who are participating in this forum. And as always, we want to thank those people who are our sponsors, and we have them on our database. And also today we're starting out with a new graduate of Cleveland State University, Noah Cook. It's the first time we've ever had a dance minor working on urban planning issues, but it's the reality of it all. And also we want to thank Nasha, who's been with us most of the year. She's a VISTA, Volunteer in Service to America, the equivalent of the Peace Corps. So we appreciate their participation and their understanding, as well as Harriet, who has been working on this for way too long. And we appreciate their participation in all the sponsorship. So I'll turn it over to Dennis Keating, Dr. Keating, and we'll get started with the conference.
Thank you, Chip. And thanks for joining us today. Our topic is the role of land banks in Ohio in addressing the affordable housing crisis that we have. And before I introduce our speakers, I wanted to mention that Amy Regal of Ohio in March released the
indicated that they did not get anything regarding restitution in this matter.
Is there a problem?
No, somebody was talking.
I'm going to mention that Amy Regal in March released the 2023 Affordable Housing Gap Report for Ohio, which is the background to our discussion today, in which it was reported that 448,000 Ohioans pay more than half of their income for rent. And that in addition to that terrible figure, Ohio is currently short about 270,000 affordable housing units, particularly for those of very low income. So this is a serious problem throughout the state. And in some cities, we're going to be talking about 3 cities and counties today, particularly acute. I want to introduce as our lead speaker, Jim Rokakis, after which we'll have speakers from 3 county land banks talk about their experience. Before his prior public service at city and county levels, Jim was a leader in addressing the issue of abandoned housing resulting from the foreclosure crisis.
True.
Came out of that,
True.
that came the creation of land banks to deal with abandoned housing and derelict nuisance properties throughout the state. Jim's been instrumental in both Ohio and elsewhere in the creation of land banks, and also in particular being very effective as a lobbyist for funding from local, state, and federal sources for those land banks. I've asked Jim to start our forum today with his overview of the state of land banks in Ohio and elsewhere, and also his view about the role of land banks in addressing affordable housing, and particularly if that role can expand in the future. So Jim, let's start with you.
Thanks, Dennis, and thanks for having a retired person on the program. My daughter's getting married Saturday, and there's about 20 people in this house, so I hope you don't hear the noise, the doors slamming, people running around. If you do, I apologize. I've asked them to be quiet, but I could hear it. Hopefully you can't. I'll mute as soon as I'm done. Somebody asked me how the wedding prep is going. I said, Dante had 9 rings of hell, right? I think there should be the 10th, and it's called wedding preparation. But anyway, interesting. It's 14 years ago today, we started first land bank in Ohio. This is the anniversary this week as we open the doors on the Cuyahoga County Land Reutilization Corporation, made possible as a result of Senate Bill 353. And as you know, the history that that initial bill didn't allow anybody but Cuyahoga County to do it. But 2 changes later, the bill opened up first through 515, opened up counties over 60,000 in population. And back under John Kasich, there was an amendment to the budget back in 2015, I believe, that opened the door to the rest of the counties. So for those of you that don't know, we're up to 66 county land banks now, and our person handling it for the Ohio Land Bank Association is a very capable guy named Sean Carvin, we used to run land banks in Trumbull County. So kind of off to the races. We've raised a ton of money, as you know. Initially, we raised 75 million through the robo-signing settlement back in 2012. And then with matching funds, we got to 114 million in that first tranche. We went to Washington. We changed some of the rules on how hardest hit funds could be used. That opened up another about 90 million in the first tranche back in early 16. We got another 197 minus OFA's administrative fees. A lot of local dollars were raised. 50 million was committed in this county. And as you know, in the 2021 budget, $150 million is made available for demo for land banks, another 350 for brownfield. Looks like there's another 150 in this new budget being proposed and another 350 for brownfield. So the result of all of this has been the creation of tens of thousands of vacant lots and also repurposed properties. And when we talk about affordable housing, I think it's important to recognize that land banks not only had a role in eliminating blight, but they've repurposed a lot of properties. And, you know, Ricardo and the folks in Cuyahoga County started it, but it's been emulated throughout the state. There are people doing it. It's got an interesting acronym they can't use. It's called the deed and escrow, but that would be called the DIE program. They've never used that name. But anyway, the deed and escrow program has worked very well. And typically for every 3 or 4 houses taken down, one ends up being rehabilitated. And you're going to hear from Curtis, and you're going to hear from Mike Rowellman, and certainly Ricardo about the activities that have done around the state around that. So it's been an interesting week in the Ohio legislature. And I have to tell you that yesterday the Senate version came in. And among the things that kind of shocked me, and I talked about it with Chip and Dennis earlier, I understand that they've eliminated OFA. They've reformulated OFA in some form, and I haven't seen that part of the bill because I was focusing on other things that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But the people at OFA are kind of stunned, and they're regrouping this morning trying to figure out what to do. And the reason OFA is critical is because OFA has taken a real interest in working with land banks around the state and providing financing and incentives to incentivize the creation of affordable housing. I know, for example, in Tuscarawas County, it wasn't Tusk, I'm sorry, it was Muskingum. In Muskingum County, they had set aside money to help put 10 houses up on spec. They were going to be modular homes, 6 months interest-free loan to the land bank. The land bank didn't pull the trigger because they didn't have the means to guarantee the loan at the end of the 6 months. But I think it's an interesting tool. And I think OFA is prepared to use whatever tools they have in their bag to assist land banks. I know they're meeting with Sean and other land bank reps about how to go forward on this. The interesting thing, though, is that Matt Huffman has become especially supportive of land banks. And I'm going to go through a release. I wasn't sure exactly what was going to be in, I always called it what was going to be in the Christmas tree, what was going to be under the Christmas tree after the Senate passed their version. But I'm just going to look at this quickly. They introduced something called the Welcome Home Ohio program. And there's $150 million across 3 categories, 50 million directed to land banks and municipalities to apply for up to $30,000 loans per parcel for renovations of single family homes. And they are also willing to allow this to be used in the construction of single family homes, $30,000 grant, $50 million in income tax credits for not-for-profit organizations who focus on renovations for single family homes, another $50 million for the purchase of foreclosed properties, which is interesting. Purchase, you don't need to purchase it, it's foreclosed. Land banks can take it. But anyway, they said in the press release, says purchase of foreclosed properties, establish a first right of refusal for land banks, help ensure homes are available for families in need. There's a lot in here about moderate income people. There's a lot in here about guaranteeing that the properties remain in the hands of the homeowner. This is specifically designed to deny out-of-town investors from taking advantage of this. And the homes that are constructed have to be a minimum of 1,000 square feet and have to be remodeled to local construction standards. So, like I said, there's a lot of fur flying right now around OFA, and I explained earlier, the Senate president had a lot of issues with OFA over something that happened in Lima. I don't know what's going to happen. I have a feeling OFA will survive or some version of it. But they're important because I think they're prepared to step up and become players in how to make these houses affordable. And those who know me from land banks know that I have been asking or kind of suggesting that land banks pivot for a while now from organizations known primarily as demolition only organizations to organizations that would be heavily involved in the construction of new housing, affordable new housing. And I have visited now modular home builders in Tennessee, South Carolina, Indiana, Ohio. And I have to say this, I don't think modular houses are the answer, but I think they should be considered as one of the answers. I think they're quality construction, and I think they can be done quickly. And that's part of the issue here. I know the city of Cleveland, Chris Harsh, you know this, just put up $5 million to build 50 homes in 5 wards in Cleveland for Habitat. I know that stick builders are the way they want to go, but maybe Habitat should think about other options. But I think for this to work, for land banks to play a critical role, there are 4 or 5 things that have to happen. I think land has to be made available for free or very inexpensively. Lord knows you got a lot of it, right, Mike and Curtis less so for Curtis. You know, Curtis is in Franklin County, or as I call it, the land of milk and honey. You're the outlier, Curtis. Your county has no problems. You're booming. You got Altel. You got the battery factory being built there. You do have a shortage of housing, but you do have land. You all have land, especially some of the larger land banks. So land has to be available for cheap or for free. I think one of the things that land bank lots have is they have water and sewer connections on site. So you don't have to go out and find water or sewer or dig wells or dig septic tanks. All that is there. And if the demolition was done properly, I think the construction of new housing can be done at an affordable cost. I think in the case of modular, if we want to be experimental in how we're going to put new housing up, I think we have to get codes amended. In cities, villages and townships are much more flexible. We have to find a way to get codes amended. So whatever you put up can be done quickly. I think you have to try to find a way to get communities to waive tap-in fees. They range from a couple $1,000s to, in some communities, $10,000 or $12,000. That just adds to the cost of this. And as I've said, I really believe that we have to start looking at modular housing as one of the options. And if you do, I think you can put up housing quickly, and I think you can put up good housing, and I think you can make it affordable. So there is a $30,000 credit that's in this bill, but I understand there will be additional credits made available to help bring down the cost of a home. I think ideally what you'd love to do is try to find a way to make this housing available for under $1,000 a month. And I think not only do I think that those incentives work, but I know, and I'm going to look to you, Ricardo, and I know that Joe is on from Maple Heights. I believe that when you put up those houses in Maple Heights and you put up those houses, that single house in Warrensville, that the land bank was involved in a subsidy. They're very attractive units, but I would call those Cadillac models, and I think you could get by with the Ford or a Chevy and provide really good quality, affordable housing. You know, I visited one of the modular home builders, and they said that their market was geared to people who are newlywed or nearly dead. And I think they were looking at me when they said that. But I think the reason I mentioned that to you is I know that the issue of affordable housing for seniors or allowing elderly folks to age in place has also come up throughout the state. I know there's an effort in Huff. I talked to the head of the Cleveland Foundation about trying to find a way to keep Huff residents in their homes, elderly folks, and especially in homes that allow them to age in place. So there are a lot of opportunities out there. And I think that land banks can play a critical role. And I think you're going to hear from some people who are doing great work, starting with Ricardo and certainly Curtis and Mike Rowellman. So I don't know if I went over, but that's my pitch.
Thank you, Mike. I should have mentioned earlier that if you have comments or questions, you can put them in the chat. I think some of you already have, as Jim was talking. And then at the end, after the next 3 presentations, we'll try to answer any questions or also air those comments. So thank you again, Jim, for the overview and also the discussion about modular housing on land that would be provided through the land banks. So we're going to have 3 presentations. I'm not going to do the biographies of our 3 excellent CEOs of land bank in 3 counties, starting with Cuyahoga, then with Franklin, and then Montgomery. That's on our website. But I'm going to ask each of them to talk for about 15 to 20 minutes after introducing their organization to tell us about their experience in having their organizations involved in the provision of affordable housing. So we're going to start with Cuyahoga and Ricardo Leon.
Good afternoon, everybody. I have a brief presentation that I'll share here as well, and thank you for allowing me to be here with you all this afternoon. Can everybody see my screen? Put it in presentation mode here. So my name is Ricardo Leon. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here with the Cuyahoga Land Bank. My boss and our president, Gus Frangos, is currently in Greece on vacation, hopefully on a beach with an adult beverage, enjoying his time. So you guys are stuck with me. So I want to give a brief presentation. Before jumping in, though, I wanted to just give kind of an overview of the history of the organization. Jim mentioned, we are celebrating 14 years as an organization, June of 2009. We, like basically most of the other land banks across the state, our inception was in response to the mortgage foreclosure crisis and managing the vacancy and blight that came, after the crisis, and trying to mitigate those impacts and thinking through, particularly in our urban core, how we can stabilize our communities and stabilize our housing markets. So not unlike many other land banks across the state, maybe the first decade or so of our life was largely focused on demolition. We were kind of known as the demolition organization, in Cuyahoga County. But over time we have really evolved. The organization has evolved pretty significantly. And so today, where we find ourselves today, there's really kind of what I like to call kind of like 5 pillars of the organization. I've had this conversation with Gus. This isn't like official. This is the way I view the organization. We have still our demolition work, right? That's our core business model. We still do demolitions. We still do demolitions every day. But we have really since the inception, we've done some development work, and I'll speak to that a little bit through what Jim mentioned, the deed and escrow program. But I would say in the last about 4.5, 5 years, we have truly become like a completely vertically integrated real estate development corporation as well. We can take a property, we can identify a property, we can knock it down, we can take ownership of that site, clean the site if necessary, and build a new home on that site. And that really isn't that won't really be the focus of this presentation today. So if you see kind of this slide, we operate in both sides of the house in maintaining affordability, but also strengthening and improving our markets. So today's conversation will really focus on that first half of the conversation. Beyond our real estate development work, we have a robust IT and data analysis, pillar of our organization. We work here locally in Northeast Ohio with NeoCanDo, with CASE, and creating the neighborhood stabilization tool. But then we also have our own proprietary software, PPS, which allows us to manage land bank inventory at the parcel level. We do also have a wholly owned 501c3. So it's kind of like our 4th pillar is our land bank charities work. And that's work that, again, I'll speak to briefly here, but it's a little bit different. That's our charitable arm of our organization, where we identify and partner with neighborhood grassroots organizations that are providing services, wraparound services, to folks in our urban core, right? To our vulnerable populations and predominantly our urban core. And so that's really our kind of what we call like our special population, vulnerable population work. And then the last kind of pillar of the organization, which this really falls under my boss, Gus, for the most part, is really kind of our policy advocacy work, and working with Jim and OLBA and a lot of the other folks on this call in identifying and improving, from a legislation perspective, the powers of the land banks and making sure that our industry continues to grow and evolve. So the mission of Cuyahoga Land Bank is to strategically return non-productive land to productive use and improve the quality of life for our county residents. This slide here is one that we always kind of show to folks. I'm sure my land bank colleagues have probably a very similar slide that they use. It just kind of shows, okay, from a 30,000 foot in the sky view, how does the Cuyahoga Land Bank get properties, and then what do we do with those properties? So across the top, you see kind of where we are able to get properties into our system. So that's tax foreclosure and forfeiture is kind of has historically been the main vehicle. But certainly early on, we worked closely with HUD, and we still do to this day. Just kind of the pipeline of properties from HUD is smaller than maybe it used to be. Certainly our GSEs, Fannie and Freddie. Fannie more so than Freddie, but still both. We also work with deed in lieu, right? Where folks have a property that they don't know what to do with, and it's in tax foreclosure, and they need to get rid of it. They can provide it to us. And then also through banks, right? Through bank REOs. And then once in those arrows, I don't want to downplay during that process of getting a house into us, there's a bunch of stuff that needs to happen there we have an amazing team that kind of does all the work that's necessary to then get it into our inventory. And then once it's our inventory, most of our properties really have kind of two paths. It's either a renovation, a path towards renovation. So then whether it's the land bank renovating property ourselves or putting a property through the deed and escrow program, partnering with a neighborhood developer or a neighborhood nonprofit. Or demolition, and demolition could be for some various purposes. It could be for the eventual new construction, by land bank or another developer. And I'll speak to how we've done both internal and external. Holding strategic assembly and economic development. That's kind of one of the pieces of the organization that's really interesting, and that we have done a lot of land assembly work, and we've helped from an economic development perspective, really help put projects together here in Northeast Ohio, and doing the work of really almost being like a site selection firm in a way. And I imagine my colleagues are doing the same in their cities as well. And then our other kind of like side yard green space, kind of urban garden type space. So looking at land bank production history, and this is through the end of 22. So again, this data is about 6 months old, just imagine it's a lot more, but no, about 6 months more of data that we just haven't churned through yet, but this is through the end of last year. We had transacted about 13,275 properties. We had acquired, we had disposed of about 12,200. We had demolished about 9,400 through the end of last year. That number has actually just passed 9,600 as of this month. And then our current inventory is right around 1,000 properties. It's fluctuating. It's probably honestly the lowest it's been in a long time, because we've been able to pass through a lot of that green space to our municipal land banks here in Northeast Ohio. So when we look at development as an organization, we kind of put it into three kind of buckets. We look at development that we've completed, development that we've completed, development that we have facilitated, and then always looking at what's our development underway. So through the end of 22, right, as of 6 months ago, we had developed, through the land bank about 1,261 properties or so. Of those, about 1,125 came through that deed and escrow program. And I'll take a moment just to kind of briefly explain that program for folks who may be unfamiliar. But the way our deed and escrow program works is we identify a vacant property. We'll put it up on our website, and we put all of our properties up on our website, and we'll allow folks the opportunity to, potentially bid or acquire the home from us. And the way that we look at it, it's not really the sense of like, oh, the highest bidder gets the property. It's really like, what's the best use? What's the best outcome for that home? And so we'll identify an end user who wants to take on the home. And then we'll give them a spec sheet, that kind of shows all the work that needs to be done to the property. And then they have a set time period to complete that property, to complete that work. During that time, we hold the deed in escrow. That's where the very creative name comes from. And during that time, we check in with them on on regular intervals to make sure they're pulling their permits, they're doing everything they need to do, the work's going along well. Obviously, we work with folks. I think we tell folks they have 120 days, but often we give extensions and allow folks to the more time if they need it. To then bring that property to fruition and get it to a point where it's a stabilized home, and it's being used for its purpose of being a home for someone. So again, we've done about 1,125 of those through the end of last year. Along the way, maybe 6, 7 years ago, the land bank started thinking about, well, there's not enough, there's certainly a ton of properties out there, but not all of them can get consumed through our deed and escrow program. So why don't we start maybe building the skill set necessary to rehab those homes internally? And what we call really is modernizing the homes. And so we've done about 112 of those kind of modernizations in-house through the end of last year. And then a very unique thing for the Cuyahoga Land Bank certainly is as of 2020, we have been the purveyors of our county housing program. So the county housing program was a program created by a county council here in 2020. It's a 5-year, $30 million program with the purpose of stabilizing markets in historically challenged and underserved communities. So the idea that the land bank would be working to go into neighborhoods where developers currently aren't working, where we have identified a gap in the market where there is a functionally broken housing market. And then we can invest either through new construction or renovation in bringing market rate units to that neighborhood to help stabilize that housing market, and then create aspirational housing in that community that then has housing at every price point. So that is a very small portion of our work, kind of our market rate component, but it's one that's important to us because while we certainly believe in affordable housing, and our deed and escrow work is really our true traditional affordable housing program, we do understand the need that every neighborhood should have housing typologies of every kind, right? Like you want to have aspirational housing in every community. So I'm looking at our development that's been facilitated. This is really properties that we have transferred to other folks for home renovation or new construction, not through our deed and escrow program. So really what falls into this bucket is really like our partnerships with our community development corporations largely, but then Habitat for Humanity, our local Habitat, and then again, that special population work that I spoke about. But the bulk of this work is really CDCs. And for those of you that know Cleveland, or, you know, I know most of us, there's a big portion of us who are from Cleveland, we have a really strong CDC network that really we have worked with since the organization's inception. So as of the end of last year, we did about 1,530 properties that we helped facilitate the development of. And then at the end of the last year, we had about 50 properties underway. It was a mix of our deed and escrow, a mix of new homes, and a mix of home rehabs. So digging into our deed and escrow work, again, this is where we really say this is our affordable housing, our traditional affordable housing program. And then I'll speak a little bit some more how, you know, in a bit about how we work with the you know, kind of LIHTC side of the house too. But through our deed and escrow program, you know, this is really us maintaining affordability. Again, we have transferred about 1,261 units through the end of last year. At that point in time, about 30% of them have gone directly to owner occupants. Average sales price of those properties is about $7,000. And then our average investment of the the folks who are buying the property, they're putting about $29,000 in. So for under $40,000, essentially, folks can own a home outright with no mortgage. They get the deed to that home in their name. So for us, the way we kind of calculate that's about a $40 million investment, impact in affordable housing across our region, across North Cuyahoga County, but certainly in the urban core. And that's my next slide here kind of shows this. We often get asked a lot, where does the land bank work? What communities are you working with? And as you can see here, every dot on this screen is some project that the land bank has been a partner to. Green is deed and escrow, our red is in our internal rehab, and then our blue is our new construction piece. Why this is important and why we always like showing this is, for those of you guys who know Cleveland, right, or are from Cleveland or know the market, that there's kind of this area east and southeast of the city that has historically had like a force field for development, right? And certainly on the west side of Cleveland, south of I-90. And you can see from this slide that we're in those neighborhoods. Those are the neighborhoods we almost exclusively work in. Not that we haven't worked in other communities or, some of those more, well-to-do or affluent communities. Certainly here and there we have, and you can see we have some of those dots across the screen. But the bulk of our work, the core of our work, is really truly in our urban core, in the historically most challenged, disinvested communities, historically Black and brown communities across Cleveland. So going back to that piece around the kind of the development facilitated, this is an important slide for us. This is this is an important piece of work for us in that what we call our mission aligned partners. Again, that's our CDCs, that's our Habitat, and that's our special projects partners. So you can see since 2010, going back to 2010, we have transferred over 1,200 properties, a house to our mission aligned partners, the bulk of which have been CDCs. I can speak to before joining the land bank, I spent 5 years as executive director of a local CDC here in Cleveland on the southwest side of the city, Metro West Community Development. Chris Harsh and I worked there together for all 5 of those years pretty much. And through that time, we were able to get over 200 units of housing from the Cuyahoga Land Bank that we were then able to get in the hands of folks in our community. So we were able to get over 200 units that we got them out of vacancy and abandonment and into the hands of folks. About 85% of those properties went to owner occupants, 90% of which were people of color in our community. And we were able to create true home ownership and create true wealth in our neighborhood. And that's just one CDC, right? And so in Cleveland, we have 17 or 18 CDCs. So all of them work with us in some way, shape, or form in trying to stabilize the market in their communities. And then similarly, along those same lines, our vacant lots transferred to our mission aligned partners. This has typically been for development. CHN, you can see, is on there quite a bit because of their scattered site low-income housing tax credit work, which I think is really important, as well as Habitat. We have been a partner to Habitat really since our inception. They've been one of, if not our best partner. To date, we've participated. They did a 100 home strategy on the southeast side of Cleveland where they built or renovated 100 new homes. And we were a partner to that work, and that work is now completed. We were both a partner via land, but also by funding. We gave grant funding to the project, and then are now going to be investing in about $2 million into their next 200 home initiative that's set to kick off later this year, in building 200 new units or renovating units across multiple neighborhoods, both east and west side of the city, and bringing true affordable housing to the community. And so I will stop there with this presentation, just because the rest of the presentation really jumps into more of our market rate housing work. But I wanted to speak to just a couple more things right before, I know Curtis is up next behind me. One of the other ways that the land bank has been truly helpful to affordable housing, and when I say traditional affordable housing, and meaning like the low income housing tax credit world, which is surprising, Jim, to hear that, OFA may not be around. I guess that's, news to me, but we have historically been a purveyor of land for those developments and aggregating land or the demolishing properties and being able to participate on the front end of getting property into the hands of low income housing tax credit developers. But one of the things, and this is certainly really Gus's wheelhouse, much less mine, but Gus had a good presentation at the OLBA conference down in Dayton, 6 weeks ago, about the work that we've been doing in year 15 low-income housing tax credit deals when they're rolling off of their tax abatement, but still want to maintain affordability, how land banks can be partners to ensuring that those properties can maintain some form of tax exemption so that they can maintain their affordability in perpetuity. And so that's something that we have started really working on here in the last couple of years in Northeast Ohio. We've got 3 of those projects that either have already occurred or are occurring. And it's something that we're kind of consistently thinking about and navigating here locally of, is there an opportunity for the land bank to be a partner to our traditional affordable housing developers who want to maintain that affordability in the long term? Can we find a way to allow them the resources that they need to be able to do that? And so that's really been a kind of an exciting piece of work that we're doing here locally. And then a couple other things along those same lines of what Jim mentioned. We have, through our deed and escrow program now, as a partner, as being a part of the county housing program, being purveyors of county housing program, we've created a grant program where folks can acquire a deed and escrow property from us, and then we'll put up to $35,000 of work into the house on the front end before they even get the keys, right? Before they even take ownership of the home. So then that really is what it typically looks like. Is like, the roof, foundation, mechanicals, kind of any of the big stuff we can take care of through grant funding on the front end. That then makes it a lot easier for that person who's buying that home to get it kind of across the finish line. And then we're working now with a couple local organizations, one of them being the Hebrew Free Loan Association, and thinking about, is there an opportunity to bring some low cost or almost zero interest debt to the table to then also get help those folks get across the finish line if they need help as well. So I know it's a bunch of information I gave you guys. Happy to answer any questions once we get to the Q&A. But again, thank you guys for being here, allowing me to be here and give this presentation. And I look forward to a good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to hold the questions and comments, including those in the chat, till after our speakers. And our next speaker is Curtis Williams from Franklin County in the greater Columbus area. Curtis? Did you mute yourself?
My apologies. Thanks again for the invite, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you folks a little bit about what we do in Franklin County. And in spite of what Jim says, we are not the place of milk and honey. We do have our challenges, we do have our issues, and affordable housing is really one of those big issues that we're dealing with. Franklin County is growing a lot, which is a good thing. The benefit of that is a lot of different things. The drawback is that we don't have enough housing for those new folks coming in. It has been a challenge for years, and it continues to be a challenge. And we're trying to pull out all the stops necessary to get it done. And Ricardo's comments, I took those to heart, made a lot of notes, and we'll be talking. So I like that. I like your programs. I like your focus. We are not as diverse in our efforts to do affordable housing. We've been in this space for about 3 years, but I'm excited about what we've been able to accomplish in that particular time frame. Okay. Nasha is going to act as my hands and and work the PowerPoint presentation for me. Nasha, if you can move forward, I certainly appreciate it. As she does that, Coastal Commission as a land bank is same as everyone else's for the most part. We found that in describing to folks that that ask us what a land bank is and what it does, we find it very difficult to get them to fully understand it. So we try to simplify our mission statement by saying that we remove barriers that prevent properties from being of value. We reuse the land in a positive way. And in doing so, we rebuild communities in a way that provides diverse housing and business opportunities. That rebuilding part is huge, in that as a land bank, we can do a lot of things, as our friends on this in this forum knows, right? You do more than demolition. As Ricardo's presentation stated, and Mike will do the same thing. We do a ton more than demolition. We provide a lot of value in a lot of ways, and affordable housing is really becoming one of the key elements that we can do to rebuild communities. So we really take that to heart and try to create unique ways of doing that. In 2019, Coastal created a community land trust as a subsidiary in order to facilitate housing opportunities for low and mod folks. But before I get into our land trust efforts, here's a program. We created a program back in 2015, 16 that really speaks to our need to create partnerships in order to create affordable housing. We created a program called Trusted Partner Program. And whereby we provided land and grants to 7 nonprofit organizations, CDCs, if you will, to create affordable rentals and homeownership opportunities within Franklin County. We provided free land. We provided $180,000 to each of the partners to rehab or to go towards building new homes, affordable homes. And over that period of time, we've spent well over $4 million in partnering with our nonprofits to build and to rehab homes for affordable housing. That program ended in 2019, 2020 actually, because in 2019, we were asked by the Franklin County Commissioners and the City of Columbus to create a community land trust. And that was new for us, right? We really didn't know much about community land trust. We've heard the term and did a little research and dug deeper into it. The community land trust model is a great model for creating affordable housing and maintaining affordable housing. It's a model that's used throughout the country. Before we created the land trust, the Central Ohio Community Land Trust, Franklin County, like a lot of communities, Columbus, like a lot of communities use federal dollars to create affordable housing, and had a big impact. Those dollars were used to provide opportunity for someone to buy a home, and the only stipulation for that person was that they had to stay in the house for at least 5 years, 5 or 10 years, depending on the local requirements. At the end of that 5 or 10 years, that person could sell that property to the market. They will make a bunch of money to help them deal with their particular economic issue. But the problem with that is that those properties that were subsidized by the federal government and local government are now in the market. They will never, ever be affordable again. So that was a problem. And the City of Columbus and Franklin County saw that as a problem, because they not only wanted to create affordable housing, they wanted to sustain it over time. And the land trust model provides that opportunity to do so. So the land trust basically is not basically, it is an organization that holds land as a community asset. The home buyer buys the structure, the home, and we lease the land to the home buyer. COCLT holds the land in perpetuity. It's a 99-year lease, and it restricts the resale of the property. Once again, that person can't resell the prop. They can sell it, but they have to sell it to someone income eligible. So it stays in the affordable housing and the affordable realm for a long time. When the person does sell the home, it is a shared equity model where they don't take 100% of the equity out. They can maximize the 25% of the equity when they sell the home. We had issues with this at the very beginning because the realty community and other folks saying, why would somebody want to do that? If they're going to buy a home and they're going to pay the mortgage, they should be able to take 100% of the equity. Well, if you do that, the house is going to the market and the house is not going to be sustainable as an affordable home. So people said that wouldn't work in Franklin County. It works. It works every day. When people get used to it and the realization that people can take equity out of it, and it's an opportunity to build wealth at some level, given the fact that these folks wouldn't be able to buy the home in the first place. They wouldn't be able to buy a $350,000 home in order to get any equity out of it. So when you consider that they can take a portion out of it, it's a good deal. We provide subsidies. We'll talk about that a little later. Nasha, can you change the slide for me, please? Thank you so much. In our model, we provide construction financing for the projects. Again, it should be said from the onset that we do not do rehabs. We are strictly building new homes. And so we're providing construction financing through our model. We will also provide $50,000 of development gap. We will pay the developer $50,000 to lower the price of the home, lower the list price, market price. We'll provide up to $50,000 affordability gap, which writes down the mortgage cost for a home buyer. We see the use of these resources as a long-term investment to create affordability and keep it in place as an investment. So some folks are saying you're spending up to $100,000 per home. Yeah, we are. But again, as a land bank, as a land trust, our effort is not geared towards making a profit. It is to create home buying opportunity for the folks who need it in our community. So that's an investment to us. Thank you, Nasha. When we first started the land trust, we started with our our CDCs, our trusted partners. They have been doing this much longer than we have. They had homes, they have models. They were sort of the engine that drove the nonprofit development community in terms of creating affordable housing. So we did trust them. We did work with them, and we inherited their models to build homes. They had house plans that already fit within the footprint of the neighborhood, and it was a good deal. We provide financing, we provided the land, and it was a good partnership. It was a great partnership under the community, under our trusted partner program, and it became even better under the trust. And what we decided to do was bring the entire home buying process in-house. Next slide, please. And so we started off again under a partnership with folks who have done this before us. And as we started to build homes, we really start to really interpret the need in the community. There were probably 1 or 2 models that were used, and these models were large, a footprint were large. 1,800 square feet home. We soon realized that can be very costly from a development standpoint. So we're starting to define our own models based on what we see in the marketplace. We are looking at doing smaller footprints, smaller homes, hopefully cut down the cost. We're developing our own standards in terms of materials and those kind of things that will sort of create opportunities for folks to buy less expensively, and also to create ways of sustaining them in these homes. We have just created we're using a process called using SIP panels, which is insulated panels where you tilt them up to do construction. Not just stick built, there's some of that, right? But you tilt up the panels, you can bring them to the site, and you could construct your home in 3 months, 3 or 4 months, which is a cost saving over the development costs and labor costs. And so we're looking at new ways of doing things to create affordability. So creating standards, looking at creative ways to do this thing that we all know is needed. We're trying to be creative in doing that. Given the fact that we, again, are not market driven, that we're not profit driven, we want to challenge the standards, and we want to challenge the market, if you will, to create more affordable homes. We want to be able to do that from the start. As you see, what we're trying to do, what we are doing, is making market rate homes affordable. That's a problem. Houses are costing $350,000 to $400,000 nowadays, and even when we throw in the land, it's still costing that much money. So while we're providing subsidy, the bottom line is, how much subsidy can you provide over time to make a $400,000 home affordable? So it's a challenge. So being creative and looking at new ways of doing things is something that we feel is our obligation to do. We're taking a dual approach to development. Sometimes we act as a developer. Sometimes we work with the developer, and we provide the write down and the development subsidy to make the deal work. And what we're wanting to do, and what we are starting to do now, is to work with minority and female-owned businesses. We've been wanting to do that from the very beginning. There are limits to minority businesses and to small businesses in terms of capacity, that's financial, economic rather, and capacity-wise. In Franklin County, in Central Ohio, we're making a specific effort across all kind of lines in order to uplift these folks to be able to help them create the economic opportunities for the businesses. But also, we need a lot of builders and developers in Franklin County because the demand is so high. Thanks, Nasha. We currently have 56 homes in pre-development and the construction phase. We have 50 homes in a pipeline with pending project agreements. And we have 44 homes projected in our planning process. And again, it doesn't seem like a whole lot, but given the fact that we've been doing this for 3 years, we are very, very excited about the inroads we're making. Thank you, ma'am. Next one, please. And again, we're listing our homes below market, and obviously it's based on the contents of the home. We've been doing 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and 2-car garage, and the prices are high, even though we've been listing our homes generally around $190,000, well below $200,000. And when we add a $50,000 subsidy on top of that, home buyers can buy our houses for less than $150,000 if they qualify. We conduct a home buyer selection drawing process because of the demand for the homes. And when we do this we may have 6 projects or 6 homes in a particular queue. And we have typically well over 100 people vying for those homes. So the demand's high. The people considering our homes, they're very interested in them. And it's just amazing what you see in terms of the need in the community. Thanks, Sasha. To date, we have built 69 homes in 3 years. 75% of those folks are minority head of household. 57% are 80% AMI and below. 51 is the average number of people that we have in our orientation class. When we first start our process, we invite people to attend an orientation class so they can learn about our programs and what they need to qualify to buy one of our homes. So those orientation classes, periodically, and they're averaging 51 people per class. And we have, again, 69 people on average that participate in each of our drawings. It's gotten up to 120 just very recently. But this is on average that we have this many people attending our drawing and wanting to get a home. The demand's high. We are a small nonprofit, been in this field for 3 years, in this area for 3 years. And it has been overwhelming in terms, in a good way, in terms of the demand and the acceptance of this particular program that we're starting. So we still provide land in a lot of different ways. We help we don't do rentals. Again, we're focusing on home ownership element. We do work with folks who provide apartments and multifamily. We provide some little subsidy in helping that. We may buy the land for them. We may provide them land for those kind of issues, typical things that land banks do. But in our production, we're new to that, to this effort, and we're encouraged by what we see and what we can do so far. Next slide. These are some pictures of our home buyers. You can see that it's a diverse group. One of the great things about this is not just, if you look at the numbers are impressive. But when you talk to the people and look at them as they go through this home buying process, these are people that typically would not be able to buy a home, given the standard process. The interest rate might have been too high. The cost of the houses might have been too high. They're paying more for rent than they are paying for the opportunity to own a home. When you talk to these folks and you see them and you see the tears and the happiness, I tell you, it's all worthwhile. And quite honestly, we all need to do more of this because of the benefit of these folks. Thank you. And I look forward to answering any kind of questions.
Thank you, Curtis. And our final speaker from Montgomery County is Mike Rowell-Weatherman. Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it. Nasha, you going to cue me up?
I'm doing it actually, and I'm working on it right now.
Okay, no, thanks. Well, appreciate the opportunity to join this group. I think the focus of the presentation that I'll provide to you here is a little more granular in terms of its focus. Probably playing more off of Ricardo's presentation than off of Curtis's, because we do not have a housing trust in Montgomery County, although I believe it is certainly a very valuable tool that can be used. Next slide, please. So like my compatriots here, our mission statement, I generally use the last line there, which is effectively, we are a community resource for troubled real estate, vacant, abandoned, brownfield sites, and so forth. We do not necessarily have a specific focus on affordable housing. Although because of the neighborhoods that we deal in terms of residential areas and blight, we tend to support that effort. Next slide, please. So in terms of programs, I'm going to focus both on our residential and commercial property reuse programs. And again, I'm going to get a little more granular than Ricardo did in terms of how our programs are operated. Next slide, please. Instead of deed in escrow, we have rebranded deed in escrow in Montgomery County to do-it-yourself renovation. So we're not dying in Montgomery County, we're doing it ourselves. The program, I think it's a wonderful program. We adopted much of what Cuyahoga had established initially. And we like to think of it as a proactive program where effectively we go out in the neighborhoods and we triage properties that are vacant and abandoned, this being one. And normally we try and do this in targeted neighborhoods where we believe that there's enough market strength there that an investor or an individual will wish to come in and restore a house like this and make it a livable property once again. In this particular case, we clean up the title of the property. We clean the property up itself. Oftentimes, there's a variety of debris left remaining inside the house or outside it before we're able to obtain it through foreclosure proceedings, tax foreclosure proceedings. This is a very modest house. This example is coming all the way back from 2017. Gives you some sense for how long we've been doing this. It was only $4,000 delinquent, but hadn't been paid in 4 years. But I think you can read the history of this property by the last two bullets there. The Medicaid lien on the property was over $100,000. That is problematic. It is obviously from a title standpoint. Apparently there was no probate on this particular property. So cleaning titles so that properties can be reused is one of the fundamental activities that we undertake as land banks. In this instance, what we have done, which is perhaps a little unique, is we created a relationship with the State Attorney General's office. We actually purchased that Medicaid lien for $1,000. You can imagine what anyone else who was looking at this might have felt in terms of trying to acquire property with that title issue sitting on it. $100,000 is, in our community, far exceeds the value of that particular property. Next slide, please. Part of our process, Ricardo talked about this a little bit. We develop an inspection report. We define what needs to be accomplished to the property and provide that online so that anybody who's interested in acquiring these property from us, and again, this could be an investor, it could be a next door neighbor, it could be a weekend warrior that wishes to improve it. They have a good understanding of what needs to be improved to the property to meet our requirements. This is actually a different property than the one I showed you in terms of the inspection report. Next slide, please. We then post the property on our website. Here's a couple examples of properties. See the one on the right sold for $26,900. We accept offers. The offers are allowed to go into the property. They inspect it. They put together their pro forma. So effectively, the idea behind this program is that anyone who's going to invest in these properties needs to determine how much they can afford to put into it in a particular geography, because these are investors. They're expecting a return on their investment. One can't tell from the street what exactly might need to be done in the property. So they're allowed to go into it, create their own cost basis for the property, and then make us an offer based upon that. Next slide, please. Those applications come in online for us, and then we evaluate them. We do some due diligence on the applicants. We look for what we would call responsible owners. They can't be tax delinquent. They can't be slumlords. They can't have any violations of housing units they own currently. If it's an out-of-town buyer, they must have a presence in the community. So they must have a property management firm that they use, and that does exist where we have investors from outside the community that are bringing financial resources to bear, have a portfolio of properties in the community. But again, they must have somebody local so that, and we do check their prior record in terms of how well they take care of their properties. Next slide, please. So here's, again, one example. This was the original property that I showed you. You can see what's transpired in terms of the exterior of the house and the interior of it. Quite remarkable change for that property. Affordable housing, I would say yes. I think Phil asked the question earlier, what is defined as affordable? I think largely that has to do with the market that you're in. The land of milk and honey where Curtis presumably lives, this would be more than affordable for the price, $75,000 roughly. If that were to be put on the market, this particular individual decided to rent the property at $825 a month. But again, becomes an affordable within our community. Next slide, please. Like Ricardo, we're sort of following suit. We call it enhanced DIY, where effectively what has happened in our market is a lot of the properties that might have been available in 2008, 2009 due to the foreclosure crisis have aged on the landscape over time, and of course deteriorated as a part of that. And so the type of properties that we're able to acquire through our foreclosure proceedings are in, shall we say, poorer and poorer shape. So as a part of that, we have enhanced our program so that we actually do more and more work in these properties. From a business standpoint, our metric is, well, if it costs more to tear it down than it does to repair it, let's repair it. This is inventory that's, there's still some equity in the property. It still maintains the fabric of the neighborhood by leaving the house up. We don't create a vacant lot by tearing a unit down. So in our space, $17,000 is roughly the total cost of a demolition to create a vacant lot. In the case of a property such as this, we might go in, repair a foundation, asbestos abatement, put a new porch on, different types of things to help incent our DIY community to make an offer on this property. Basically, we're reducing the financial risk to them is what we're trying to do. And that is working out rather well for us. Next slide, please. Yeah. Another area that we have worked in, and this is not necessarily directed to affordable housing specifically, but was tornado relief. In 2019, we had a tornado come through, actually multiple tornadoes come through the Dayton community and demolished a number of different housing units here. The community kind of pulled together. Next slide, please. And a variety of different organizations came together to help this recovery effort. And you can see that list here is quite extensive in terms of the types of institutions that came to the table. I will tell you, though, that in the Dayton community, Dayton-Montgomery County community, the CIC, the depth of the CICs that are here and their capabilities is far less than what I see and have heard about both in Columbus and Cleveland. I point this out because we're talking about housing and affordable housing throughout the state. And so every community is going to have a different fabric in terms of the resources that it has available, whether it be the financial resources to do the work itself, or whether it be the human resource and that capital to execute the work that's necessary. In our community, unfortunately, we do not have some of the CIC horsepower that I see in other communities, or larger communities, shall we say, in the state. And so we look for different ways to cobble together efforts to pull off, in this case, recovery of tornado disaster. Next slide, please. So in this particular instance, the role of the land bank, which has been cited earlier, has really been to provide parcels of land. And what you see here in terms of the image, actually, obviously the groundbreaking is always a great event, but it took a great deal of volunteer labor and effort and philanthropy to provide for some new housing for those who were victims of the tornado. On the left, I think it was a Mennonite community came in, all volunteer labor to put these, pull these houses together to build new ones. The structure on the right actually was, I believe, a land bank property that was renovated by one of the volunteer organizations as well. And these properties were then made available to, again, victims of the tornado. Next slide, please. We also have provided loans, financial loans up to $50,000 to our local communities if they wanted to get into the renovation business. I would say that it's probably not been as robust as we might have hoped. We actually see the suburban communities doing more of this than we have seen our urban communities do it, our larger communities. And I think that has largely to do with the strength of the market in our more suburban communities. Taking advantage of our loan program works well for them because in the end, their objective is to have an owner occupant. In our more distressed areas, the objective is to improve and stabilize the neighborhood. So it's a bit different in each particular case. What you see on the left is the house before, and on the right is the finished product. And in this particular case, we have a very low loan fee. It provided a little cash flow for this particular suburban community to do this work. In the end, I think they actually made some money on it. We've had other communities that actually have lost money on doing this kind of work. Next slide, please. Another program that has been on pause for us since the litigation has taken place with the Board of Revision process is we call the tax foreclosure renovation process. This is a reactive process for us to acquire properties that are on the landscape that are vacant, abandoned, and tax delinquent. So in this particular situation, they don't end up in our inventory where we proactively go out and acquire these. These are properties identified by residents in our community or businesses for that matter. And there's a tool that we have on our website where they actually can go and find these delinquent properties. We're trying to leverage that private revenue, if you will, the financing of that in lieu of our doing it as the land bank. And so they can go on our website, they can go to a property search map, and they can identify properties in a particular geography, and then they come back to us and ask whether or not they might qualify for this program. Again, anybody who would make application to us would have to be a responsible owner of current properties. So there's a diligence process behind this. There's a deposit they put down, and then we sponsor effectively the foreclosure of the property. Next slide, please. We do require as a part of this that the applicant go through a home ownership program. In some cases, we have individuals who are trying to do this largely without financial resources. They see this as an opportunity to become a homeowner. Oftentimes, they've never owned a home before, don't understand the responsibilities that go along with that and the costs, the ongoing cost of maintaining a home. So we want to make sure that we're not putting somebody in a position where later on they're apt to fail. So we're looking for financial capability. We're looking for understanding of what it takes to be a homeowner to get qualified. As a part of the process, we do provide a revisionary deed. meaning that if this applicant does not renovate the property, does not improve it, and it becomes, again, either tax delinquent or ends up on a nuisance list for one of our communities, we are able to actually pull the deed back and return it and put it back in our inventory. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a property that went through in 2018 through this process. Don't ask me why this particular gentleman believed that this was going to be his casa in the future, but he did. And next slide, please. The gentleman had a vision, and you can see by the transformation here, he more than exceeded our expectations of improving this particular property. Very, very proud of what this particular individual was able to do. I think he's more of a weekend warrior than he was an investor, but he clearly had the talent and the energy to renovate that house. And I love the boxes, the garden boxes in the back of the house there in the lower left, which is raised beds. Is pretty cool. Next slide, please. Next generation type program that we have implemented is we call Thriving Neighborhoods, and much of the work that we do historically has been to tear down houses, and land banks have sort of been branded as that. But now we're moving more towards stabilization of those neighborhoods by doing renovations and so forth. I want to give you an example of a project like that we executed a few years ago. Next slide, please. This was a predominantly older neighborhood. Actually, it used to be a site of an amusement park called Pine View in Dayton. It's out on the periphery of Dayton proper, so it's not in what I would call the core of the community. The housing types are post-World War II, 1,000 square foot ranch on slabs. And I would suggest that if we're looking for a model of housing that's affordable, post-World War II product probably provides that. Very economical to build, repetition of form, not necessarily anything too sexy architecturally, but affordable. So what we did in the case of Pine View is we did an assessment of the neighborhood itself, and we found some interesting things. Next slide, please. The analysis that we did and the community engagement that we did, which ultimately left some planning to develop something that was sustainable for the neighborhood. Next slide, please. And this is the shocking information that we found. Across the top of the matrix here, Pine View being highlighted, is the valuation of housing units in that neighborhood by square foot. And the highest is with 2006, where prices were offered at $44 a square foot. At the bottom end, houses were at $11 a square foot. Now, put that into perspective, houses in that neighborhood were roughly 1,000 to 1,200 square feet. So if you wanted a house in the neighborhood, you could buy it for $11,000 in 2013. We compared that to 3 other neighborhoods with very similar housing stock. In fact, I would say it was exactly the same, probably the same builder even, different locations with our community. And those are further to the right there. And you can see that one neighborhood, the Salem Village, while Pine View is at 44, it was at 91. Bottoming out, if we look at Salem Village, it bottomed out at $59 a square foot. So a considerable difference between the two. Next slide, please. So our objective here was to build value back into that, because effectively the community and the residents that lived in there, which predominantly were African-American, were aging in place. Their wealth was basically removed. You know, your house is presumably your nest egg for retirement and a way to build wealth. That wasn't the case in this neighborhood. So the front door to the neighborhood was had a considerable number of blighted homes on it. So we, in what I would call a renovation capital stack, we first removed a lot of blighted properties along the main corridor that led into the community. We then went in and renovated houses to create some new comps for the lending community, because the lending community effectively was telling us that, look, you know, when I do an appraisal, if the house next door sold for $11,000, then that's my comp. We wanted to provide some new comps. We did engage with the lending community to see what their threshold of for lending would be in the neighborhood. And so we went in and we actually have renovated 3 houses in that neighborhood. We tore down about 20, primarily along the main corridors that lead into the neighborhood, because as an interested party, if you were touring the area with your realtor, you probably would tell the realtor to keep on driving and not get into the neighborhood at all, when in fact the fabric of the neighborhood was pretty well intact. We also got our houses in the parade of homes with the Home Builders Association, which they were excited to do. Next slide, please. We also had, as a part of all of this effort, this is a much more comprehensive effort with a CDC locally, where the local, I'm going to call it a spring-fed pond, they cleaned it up. They had a neighborhood cleanup day out there. We had some philanthropy come in. The UAW built a fishing pier, the Sportsman's Club from the UAW. So there's a lot of different other entities that became involved in this. The Legal Aid Society locally got involved to make sure that the elderly residents that may not have a will, that they were getting those wills put in places so those properties would get probated and turned over. Citywide Development did some planning in the neighborhood. So we had a variety of different activities going on in one place at one time to help generate and improve the values of the properties there. Next slide, please. So here's our first comp in that neighborhood. We went in and we spent $83,000 on the renovation of this house. This again is sort of the typical home in the neighborhood. You can see the before and after there. We actually thought we would sell it for about $40,000. Again, if the other houses were selling at that time, the values increased probably in the $25,000 range. We ended up selling it for $53,000. So we exceeded our expectation, but we also exceeded our expectation in terms of expense. So, but they did go kind of hand in hand. We were pleased with the outcome there. Next slide, please. The second house was very similar in terms of its styling. This one we actually sold for $65,000 or $69 a square foot. So you can see that the trend here is going upward. Next slide, please. And the third house sold for higher than list price. And this was back in 2019. So this was pre the euphoria that happened here in the last couple of years in terms of the real estate market. But that was over $90 a square foot. So our effort here was not only to provide some affordable housing in the neighborhood, but also to raise property values and reestablish wealth in the pockets of the residents that live there. Next slide, please. We are currently working with the city of Dayton in 5 neighborhoods, utilizing an ARPA funds to develop some housing in those neighborhoods. We expect that is going to put us in this role of renovation, which is, quite frankly, is a challenging area for, I'll say, public institutions, because each house is different. And the requirements for renovation for those houses is always different, unlike building new homes where you could create a template and replicate that over and over again very easily. Next slide, please. On the commercial side of things, next slide, please. In terms of affordable housing. We have provided a number of lots for LIHTC products. We do not do the LIHTC products, so but we have been providing those to an organization called County Corp. They have worked with the developer and are creating the units that you see here on lots that are formerly owned by the land bank that were demolition targets. Next slide, please. On the commercial side of things, this is a huge project in the Dayton Metroplex. At this point, it's $150 million development of 7 commercial structures right in the heart of the community. Our role in this, and this does have a LIHTC component to it, and that's why I bring it up, was this particular property was over $600,000 tax delinquent. And our role in acquiring this property was to accept the property as a deed in lieu of taxes. So the owner donated these 7 structures to the land bank. And by doing so, they were relieved of the real estate tax burden. And then we conveyed the property to the city of Dayton, who in turn conveyed it under a development agreement to the developer. That project is going very, very well right now. There's a LIHTC component in this, but there's also an incubator space in here. There's commercial space. It's definitely a mixed use development, but nonetheless, a role for a land bank in this particular project. Next slide, please.
So Mike, I should probably have you, can you end it on your next slide or two?
Yeah, this is just an interior view of some of the units that they're doing there. And I think that was about it anyway.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike. So before we get to the questions from the chat, a couple things. For those of you that want to know more about the development of land banks in Ohio, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the book that Jim Rokakis co-authored, The Land Bank Revolution, which takes you through the whole process of developing the land bank authorization in Ohio and then developing land banks. And speaking of that, Jim, are you there?
I am. I was just looking for a copy of the book to hold up, but
let me ask.
as I said, Dennis, we've been selling them by the dozens.
Oh, good.
We're also making them available to people. In all seriousness, if anybody would like a copy, they should get me their address and I will make one available. There it is. There you go, Kermit. You're in it. You know, it's interesting.
Excellent.
And we finished that about 2.5 years ago. And so much has happened since that time that I really feel that we could do additional chapters. I mean, people like Curtis and Mike could, there's Tony, he brought it up too. You could write another book. That's how much land banks are doing around the state.
So let me ask one question before we go to the chat questions, Jim. You see any possibility either in Ohio or other states or nationally of legislation that would directly fund land banks in terms of their operations? Is that a possibility given the growth of land banks, at least in some states like Ohio?
Well, there's a discussion being actually brokered by Marcy Kaptur that's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks with Marcia Fudge, former, mayor of Warrensville Heights, now former Congress, now head of HUD. Marcy has been following the progress of land banks around the state and has expressed interest and a willingness, and she's setting up a meeting. It may not be with the director of HUD herself, but it will be with people there who I think will be receptive to a message about trying to find a way to help land banks. I've lost track of the number of land banks operating around the country right now, but it's in the 200 plus range. So they've really kind of taken off as a tool.
And you can get a list of those at the Center for Community Progress website if you want to look that up. Chip, do you have the questions from the chat? Or does Nasha have them? Or Noah?
Yes, I have the questions. How do you want me to put it on the screen or?
Why don't you just read them out? Let's go. And any of the 4 of you that want to respond, go right ahead.
Okay. So the first question we have is from Patricia Carter. What about aging in place in Shaker Heights apartments? And that was during Jim's presentation.
You think she means having land banks renovate buildings to help seniors stay in place? Maybe that's the gist of it.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Okay.
Yeah, in place.
I think one of the speakers did mention addressing senior.
Yeah, so let me just say this, the Senate just put their version in yesterday. And it's a long version. I've been trying to read it and get a sense of what land banks can or can't do. Are you asking if a land bank can take some of the money available through the budget allocation to go into an existing apartment and make it aging friendly? I'm not sure what the question is.
Well, the situation within my building is that it's in need of repair, period. And I was wondering whether we have a lot of senior citizens that are disabled. And we were wondering whether there would be some companies that can come in and basically do some reconstructions and allow the senior citizens that are disabled to remain here.
Is the building owned by, is it a condo building or is the building owned by outside investors?
The building is basically up for sale right now. It was a Montlack property.
Oh, okay. It was owned by, not by the Ken who passed away, but I believe by his nephew. So here's
Kurt
the
Montlack, right.
Yeah. So here's the situation, Patricia. This bill goes out of its way to say that it has to be owner occupants and it can't be out of town investors. So I can't speak to a solution to that specific problem. Is it Cleveland or is it Shaker?
Shaker proper.
So it's in Shaker proper. I don't, based on just what we got in yesterday's bill, there's nothing there. I'm gonna maybe defer to others. Any Shaker representatives on the line here?
I think Carmela's on the line, if she can speak for it.
We have that person.
Carmela Williams was on the line, I believe. She can speak towards that issue, perhaps.
Well, if not, maybe you could.
Hi, good evening or good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, forgive me. I am en route driving, but as far as Shaker Heights, no, there's nothing that we saw in that bill at this time that would be helpful. If there is someone at the land bank or in some other area that may be able to offer some guidance on how to address situations like this with these older buildings and owners that are not available, it would be we'd appreciate it. As a council member, we have talked about it with our administration on how to assist and support residents like Mrs. Carter. And unfortunately, right now, the tool that we can use is going through our ordinances to cite violations and so forth, which is a process in itself, but it doesn't give residents the immediate relief that they need.
Well, Chip Romley works with a group around Shaker Square that's been dealing with exactly that problem in many buildings. So maybe you could at least contact Chip and see if he has any advice for you.
We have no magic tools here, but we'll try.
All right. Thank
Okay,
you.
Masha, can we go to the next question?
Okay, the next question was from Phil. He would like each presenter to define affordable housing used by their organization.
Well, maybe since we have 3 different cities and it varies around the state. I'm not sure we have to go through the numbers, but obviously Dayton's going to be different, as Mike said, perhaps than Columbus for sure. So not sure we have to go after those. Next question.
The next one is for Ricardo. About how many residential properties is the CCLRC demolishing a year now?
Good question. So this year we'll demolish somewhere in about 400 to 450 residential properties with leveraging the Ohio Department of Development resources that we've received in the first round. We will be applying for the second round, which our hope, I'm sure, Mike and Curtis will be applying too, which our hope is that it'll be opening up. That portal will open up sometime in the next like 90 days or so. And that's our hope is to do another 400 to 500, just based on however many we can get ready to go on day one.
Okay, thank you. So Patricia, your question about the land bank website, someone posted a response to that in the chat. The next question was from Elizabeth Zach. What is the typical profile of the deed and escrow purchasers in state versus out of state, companies versus individuals, etc.?
So I can answer for Cuyahoga. So we don't deal with anyone out of state. They have to be really in state and really almost exclusively Cuyahoga County. The profile varies. Like I said, it's about 30% have gone directly to owner occupants. And then about 70%, the remaining 70% have gone to what we call, investors. But I think Mike used the term, or maybe Curtis did, like trusted investors, or folks who we have at least done some kind of background on. And so we have like a little thing that we call like the buyer eye, but because of the data that we have access to, we can check if folks have had open violations on their properties, in the last 3 years. We can see if they've had anything in tax delinquency. Have they lost a property in the last, 36 months? Like we can kind of get a sense of whether the person who's interested in this home is someone who's not like a flipper or like a bad actor and genuinely cares about the community and is conscious of the community that they're investing in. And that's typically the profile we go with, right? Like if for whatever reason, like any of that kind of buyer eye work brings up like a red flag of saying, hey, this person's like a known flipper, or they've got 7 houses of open violations, then we're not going to move forward with engaging with that potential buyer, because we want to ensure that once these properties leave our hands and end up in the hands of whomever is the homeowner, that they're actually, they're a good member of their community and they're a good neighbor in their community.
Yeah, I would just augment that, say we actually subscribe to a database that does background checks on people. Yeah, you never know. Everybody's trying to game the system, right? So, but the very intelligent part of the deed and escrow program, or DIY as we call it, is that we retain the deed. So the buyer of that property is obligated to improve it, and they're obligated to improve it in a certain time frame. We prefer not to take a property back, but we have. And honestly, it's not because the buyer was a bad actor in any way, shape, or form, but life happens. And the downfall of the program is that you have to have cash to do the work. Lenders are not going to let you borrow on a property that is owned by the land bank, right? That becomes a barrier. Although we've talked to some lenders here locally who said they would, but we've not seen that. So that I would characterize the DIYers in our space being more either weekend warriors or small contractors. And this is what they like to do. They like to go in, they got a small crew, they go in, they fix it up. They're handy folks, fix it up, and then either put it in their own portfolio for lease, which is fine, or they sell it. And there's not too many people out there that are weekend warriors looking for a house. So we don't see that many of our applicants that are actually ending up in home ownership. Although one of my favorite stories is a gentleman and his wife who bought 2 of these, and he was clearly a weekend warrior, and he wanted to keep his kids in the neighborhood. And he not only was he fixing up the neighborhood, but he also was keeping the kids and the grandkids close. So it can be done, but you have to have cash available to make the improvements.
Right, and to Mike's point, I think that's what's really, and I know you guys are doing the same thing, this ability to have kind of the grant funding to help with some of the costs of the repair. And then here now we're trying to find, are there CDFIs or other like mission-based lenders that can bring low interest, low cost debt to get that property across the finish line, because the traditional, to Mike's point, the traditional banking environment just won't lend on this property, these types of properties.
In Franklin County, we, believe it or not, we have not used deed and escrow for any of our projects over the years we've been in existence. There is, however, another land bank in the region, and that's the city of Columbus. They have one. We don't have any residential property in our portfolio in terms of structures. The city does, and they will either use a deed and escrow under the same auspices as Ricardo and Michael. What they tend to use, though, is a contract that has a reverter clause in it if folks aren't going to perform. So same impact, same standards, but that's the tool that they use.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, are the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County sufficiently leveraging these billion-dollar downtown real estate deals to obtain the funding from developers necessary to expand your efforts to meet the demand that we know is not being met?
Or and the alternative is ARPA money. I think ARPA was mentioned. I know Mike did, being used or will be used for affordable housing, preferably in conjunction with the land bank. You know,
I can speak to Cuyahoga, at least here in Cuyahoga County, we're not like we're not currently or haven't been in conversations around like getting, any income off of like real estate deals here in downtown or anything like that. Our main funding source is just DTAC, is Delinquent Tax Assessment Collection Fund, which I think would be the main source of income for every large county land bank across the state. And basically what that is here in Cuyahoga County, for example, by what we've seen and has been generally the truth for the last decade plus is about 85% of people pay their real estate taxes, on time. That 15% of people who don't pay on time, of those people, about 80% of folks end up paying at some point. And when they do pay, there's a delinquent fee, there's a 10% fee. Well, that fee goes into a pot that then gets divided up amongst a bunch of different, between us and the county. And so we get a portion of that penalty fee. So the funding that we receive from the county, from our folks across the street, does not take any funding away from schools or libraries or municipalities or anything like that. It is solely just off of that delinquent fee.
So the answer is no.
Okay, so the next question, it was during Mike's presentation, or Michael, what building is that? It looked like a brick building that was under construction, and there, I think, was like a waterfall, if you can remember.
Yeah, we call it the arcade building, but actually the arcade is a collection of 7 buildings. I did respond in the chat. I think it was 35 West 3rd Street is the actual address of that particular structure.
Thank you.
Okay, and the next question is for Frank. It looks like it was a 2-part question. Frank, did you want to ask your question? I don't know if it was just a statement or a question, but.
Oh, definitely not a statement. Was responding, Elizabeth Zach's question got me thinking about, if we're talking about land banks and affordable housing, what data do we actually have? And she asked for the profile of the buyers. And I thought, what if we took it further? And I think if I understood correctly, Ricardo, I think you said that land bank's primary program to provide affordable housing would be deed and escrow. And if I'm mistaken, I apologize. But if that's true, it would be helpful to have the financial profile of the end user buyers. What is their typical income? What price have they paid? And if it's a rental property and a developer got it and then made it affordable housing for a renter, well, then what's the monthly rent? So is the land bank keeping track of that kind of data?
I think it's
Some, but not all. Certainly we know the price that it sold for and what the average investment was. And we don't ask for folks' income on the front end, but they have to display that they have the ability to acquire the property and afford the rehab. So that typically can look like bank statements. Some folks will use like credit cards. We try to be like super lenient, whatever they have available to them to come up with that kind of total nut. But beyond that, we haven't historically asked for much more information beyond that. I appreciate the sentiment though, and I think that could be a place where we start to improve our data and analytical expertise in thinking about, well, what's the next step of this body of work?
The reason I ask is because if 70% of the buyers were investors, it might be useful. You could require it. You can require the investors to say, we're going to make sure this is to an affordable, I don't know, with some definition of affordability. And did I understand correctly, 70% of the deed and escrow were investor buyers?
Yeah, historically, yes. These days, it's much more skewed to homeowner occupants because of the deed and escrow plus program is only for owner occupants.
Okay.
So in the last 2 years, it's probably more like the reverse, like 70% owner occupant. But yeah, historically, it's been about 70% investor from the beginning of time.
Okay.
Right, Frank, I think Curtis did provide that information for the community land trust buyers. You had both the prices and also what their eligibility income would be. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we do collect data on our buyers and their income and their demographics. I think it's important to do that. And just to be able to have a discussion on it, right? See where the need is and see who you're providing services to. And it's good information to collect. We weren't doing it at first until we said that we got to do this. So let's go back and collect it and put it in the file somewhere, because we got to be able to talk about this and better understand the environment that we're working in, who we're trying to serve.
Thank you.
If there's an opportunity, can I ask Ricardo to chime in a little bit more on the developers?
Sure, go ahead.
And very specifically, the question was about downtown development and raising money. The county land bank, Ricardo, if you want to talk a little bit about how you have worked with developers and you have raised significant fees, and then also have done some market rate to raise additional dollars to help underwrite the weaker markets. And that's an important note, that the county land bank's been able to help underwrite markets that need help. But you have been able to raise fees working with developers in other stronger markets.
Yeah, we've been able to do a mix of both. Again, I think some of the ways that we've been able to generate fees have been through, I guess, some of like the land assembly, site assembly type work. I think I mentioned too, like this idea of being able to work with developers who are seeking tax abatement or exemption, and we can partner with them and generate a fee in lieu of taxes. That has been something that has worked a couple of, we've only done a few of them, but it has worked a few times. So there have been some ways to generate that kind of fee for service model. It's not, I'll be honest, we haven't it's not like a model that's very mature. It's not a model that we have really built out and have like a real template for. It's kind of just as development opportunities we're approached by developers with development opportunities, or really where the last couple have really been focused on, again, are those year 15 projects that are in neighborhoods that are either now really were challenged maybe 15 years ago when the project was done, but now have flipped in our neighborhoods that are more hot, more affluent neighborhoods, and you want to maintain the affordability. We can work with the developer to do that. So again, it is leveraging those development relationships, but it's certainly not something that like we're doing on a regular basis or we're partnering with on consistently.
Okay, Chip, we got about 10 minutes left. Time for a couple more questions. Nasha?
Okay, all right.
Maybe two more?
Sure. Roger Smith asks, Mahoney Land Bank has been demolishing heavy with long-standing successful deed and escrow program. What affordable housing program would you advise an organization like ours to first explore to begin expanding our work?
Not quite sure who that was directed to.
Who is that question for, Roger?
And why don't we just any of the participants like to respond to that?
I can start off. I think it's important though for the community to kind of ask that question of itself. What's your need? And analyze that and determine if you want to concentrate on neighborhoods. Do that sort of internal homework to get a better understanding of what your need is and what the demand is and where the problems are. And that should give you a good barometer in which to kind of sort of look at your next steps and what kind of service you want to provide and what kind of instruments you need to provide to get it done. But I would say, look, keep an open mind as you go down that path, because when you look at affordable housing, I think each one of our partners talked about the other folks that's involved in the affordable housing spectrum. It's not just us as land banks. And those folks need to have a say or be involved in that well too, if you're going to address the affordable housing issue. There's financing, there's the land. We deal with certain parts of that, but we don't deal with all of the affordable housing issue. As we got into this, I knew affordable housing. I spent 30 years in economic development. And it's amazing folks are just now saying housing is an economic development issue. It has been for years. So there needs to be that community dialogue on what the need is and how you best approach it. And I think the best way to do it is with a community partnership.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're not going to be able to get through, unfortunately, all the comments and questions, but maybe one more now to finish for this session anyway.
Dennis,
Is
could
there
I-
currently, oh, go ahead, Mike.
Could I add to that, Frank, what you were asking a little bit earlier is kind of like, could we leverage a DIY program to make more affordable housing? And I think there's a point here, because when I hear that, I shudder a bit. And the reason I shudder is not because we're not interested in supporting that as an institution, but we're dealing in really weak markets. So now on top of trying to take a property that's in a weak market neighborhood, and I'm trying to get an investor or anybody to improve that property. Now, suddenly on top of that, I'm going to tell them that they have to rent it out to somebody at 80% of AMI. The more of the burdens that get stacked one on top of another, ultimately, I think it would destroy the program. Now, if we had a property that were in a very, let's call it a hot market, strong market within the Dayton community, I think we could probably pull that off. But for 95% of the properties that are in our system that go through DIY, what we're hoping for is to help stabilize that neighborhood, to get somebody in there that's willing to invest to make that property livable once again, to be an asset to the neighborhood, a part of that fabric again. We're not trying to solve the additional objective of putting in affordable housing, however we define that, okay?
Yeah, and I would add, Mike, that's a really good point. I think that's where we have found that sweet spot of Habitat for Humanity, CHN Housing Partners, our CDC partners, who do maybe have more access to fundraising and philanthropy, maybe have more access to subsidy that maybe comes from their electeds or whatnot, that then we can partner with them very similarly to like the deed and escrow program, but it's actually with like that nonprofit partner who can do the affordable housing work too. So that's really where that sweet spot. And to answer that question from Roger, I think it sounds, if you have a successful deed and escrow program, you have the bones of what's probably the best place to start. Now, to Curtis's point, is identifying who are those partners that can help, have that community conversation and identify those partners who can say, hey, I can take, instead of you selling a house to, you're going to sell 10 houses this month, you're going to sell them to 10 individual people. Maybe I can take 5 of them from you and I'm going to put them down this track to make sure that they maintain affordability, and that's where you can start building that relationship.
So as I mentioned earlier, the Ohio Land Bank Association will be convening in Cleveland this fall, I believe the middle of November, if I recall correctly. So if you really want to know more about Ohio land banks, you might consider attending that convention. I'm going to turn it back to Chip, and I want to thank all our speakers and all of our participants in this session today.
I thank Dennis Keating. Dr. Keating ran the helm down at CSU's Levin College of Urban Affairs for a long time as the associate dean. And I want to thank all of our participants who offered their insights and ideas. I think every time we do these things, we learn from each other and we learn as a community and we grow as a community. So thank you all for participating. We look forward to our next forum, which is going to be focusing on the inventory of the property survey that Frank Ford has been involved in. And Frank, do you remind me the date of that again? July, when is it? June 27th? Is that right?
Yes.
June 27th at noon. So Sally Martin and the inventory of Cleveland. So look forward to that next forum. And thank you all for participating. Thanks again.
Okay.